Hi everyone, so we're going to be making the cranes today. This one may be a little more difficult, but I'm using two different ways. I'm first using just straight origami paper. It's the same color on both sides. And then on the other example, I'm going to be using a double-sided origami paper, so one side is blue and the other side is white. Follow whichever works best for you. Some people just need to see the folds, some people need the color differentiation, and that's fine. They will be separated into first one color and then two color, so you can skip to whichever part you'd like to watch. But wish y'all the best and have a great day. Everyone, so we're going to be making the crane today. I'm going to be using two-sided paper just for the ease of knowing which direction we need to do our folds. If you have two-sided paper, this would be a great time to use it. If not, what you can do is once you have your square, is take a marker, or I prefer it be easier with a crayon or a colored pencil so the ink doesn't get on your hands, but color one side so that way we can have our colored side and we can have our white side. But what we're going to do once you have your paper colored, if you want the color to show on the outside of the crane, you're going to fold along the diagonal so that way our white side comes out, then unfold and fold along the other diagonal. Once we get this fold, we're going to undo and we're going to flip it so that way now our colored side is on the table and our white side is facing up. So from here we are going to fold in half into a rectangle. So our colored side should now appear while we fold it from bottom to top into a rectangle, and then we're going to unfold and fold from left to right. So from here you can kind of see the paper pops up. I'm not touching it, but you can now see the white inner side. So with our creases like this, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the corners and we're going to push, and if our creases are in properly, the paper should fold out on its own, so that way the corners come together and you're just going to use your nails. So we now have this kind of shape. What we're going to do is flatten it, so that way there's two flaps on the left and two flaps on the right, and we have a square. So what I'm doing is I'm just going over these edges again to make sure they're nice and tight for our next step. So what we do is we have this crease here in the center, and we're going to use this as our guideline. We are going to take this top level, this top flap, and we're going to fold this bottom outer edge into the center, like this. So I'm going to zoom in so y'all can see a little more. So I took this top flap, bottom outer edge, and folded it into the center. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom outer edge of this left side and fold it into the center. These should line up as close as possible to create a straight line along the top. Then I'm going to put my crease in. For the next steps we're going to do after this, you're going to need to make sure that this crease is in really nice, really tight, so that way the paper remembers where it needs to go. Once we get this in, we're going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. We're taking our bottom edge, folding it up into the center. So there's the guideline. We're going to press in our crease, get it nice and tight, and do the same on the other side. I'm turning it just so I can get a better angle on this bottom corner. There we go. So now we have this kite shape. What we're going to do now, I'm going to show y'all first, is I'm going to open these flaps we just folded, not all the way, just a little, just enough so I can get my fingers in and separate the two layers. So you see how the white layer is now coming out? Oh, wait. Yeah. So for this next step, we're going to pull this layer up. But to help the paper know where to go, we need to do one extra fold. So we're going to take this top triangle on our kite shape and fold it down right along this top edge that our flaps made. Like this, and press in your crease. And then you're going to flip it over and do it this way too, because we're going to do it on both sides. So the paper needs to remember both directions. So I'm going back to the side I started on. We're opening our flaps just enough to separate the two layers. And now with our creases in place, the paper should remember their shape, and when you pull up, it'll kind of open for you. So that way you can pull it all the way and the sides come in, and it's going to create this long diamond shape. So I'll do it again in slow motion. Here's our shape. Our flaps were pulled in, but now I'm going to pull it up, all the way up. The paper kind of folds back in on itself. You may need to do some little tweaks along these sides here to make sure everything's in place. But then once you get it here, just use your nail or your finger and flatten out those edges. Now I'm going to flip and do the same thing on the other side. Open our paper just enough to separate the layers, and then pull it up, 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 until it creates the long diamond shape as well. So I'm flattening out my edges. What we're going to do next is we're going to work on this bottom part. So it should look like two legs flapping. What we're going to do is we're going to take the top layer, just this part, and we're going to fold it in towards the center crease. So I'm going to hold it up to the camera so you can see that here it's folded in towards that center crease, making sure it's nice and sharp, nice and tight along this edge. And we're going to do it all the way around, so each side. So this one will come in towards the center to match up here. Right along this inner crease. Make sure that when you're folding it, it doesn't go over these inner layers, that it's right in line with them, or even just a little behind them. So that way when we do the next two steps ahead, it won't overlap. So once we get this shape, we're going to flip it over and do the same thing, folding them in towards this center line. And then on the other side too. So now we've got this really long, thin diamond. For this next step, I'm going to have you hold it, thumb and index finger on one side, and hold it up. So that way you can see this space in between. So what I do is I'm going to zoom out so you can see the whole shape. Is once you have it, you're going to stick your finger here between the layers, and you're going to take your thumb and put it between the two long flaps, and using your finger and thumb you're going to push up, so that way the flap comes up and you can see it's kind of creating what looks like a tail. And then once it's about here, you can take these bottom points, showing y'all from different angles, and push them together, and that will fold this part in half. To have it at an angle here. So on this other side we're going to do the same thing. Finger between the layers, thumb on the back of the flap, and it might be a little harder on this side, but that's okay if you're pushing it up. It's about, so if you laid it on the table it would be lying flat out. So hold it there. Then these two bottom points, you're going to push them together. You may need to straighten out an edge here. That's okay. So now we have, kind of looks like a crown. Then you're going to pick one side, whichever. I'm going to use this side, and do the same motion. Index finger and thumb. This time your thumb's going to go in the space and your index finger on the flap, and fold it down, and this will be the head. Then you hold it in place, press the top together. So there's his head. And then for the wings, you're going to do index finger and thumb on one side, so it's about halfway down, and same on the other side. So here you're going to need to be careful not to pull too hard, just a gentle back and forth motion to open the back. So it'll kind of look like a rounded square here. Then you can let go, and you got your crane. For this example, I'm using the one color, so we're starting with our diagonal fold in half to create a triangle, putting in our edge. Then when we're going to unfold and fold our other diagonal. Here we're going to unfold, so that way our creases are pointing up off the table, and from here we're going to fold in half to create a rectangle. It's important that these folds are going on opposite sides of the paper, so that way the corners we need for our next fold will stick up on their own. So we're folding in half to our other rectangle, and so from here we're going to grab the corners and push in. So see how the paper's sticking up on its own, standing up. This way we know all of our creases are the right direction. So we can fold it into this, I call it a tree shape. Here I just need to fix my top point a bit. But here we go. We've got this tree, and we can flatten it into a square. So there's going to be 2 flaps on this side and 2 flaps on the other side. What we're going to do now is, using this center crease as a guide, we're going to fold our top flap into the center like this, and we're going to do the same on the other side. So that way we'll get a kite shape. So now we're going to flip it over and do the same thing to make our kite. Folding our outer bottom edge into the center. Sorry about that. Turning so we get our full kite. We got both flaps on both sides, and what we're going to do now is we're going to open this just enough, but first we need to put in our top fold. So we're bringing this top triangle down, putting in our crease, making sure it's nice and tight, turning it around and doing it in the other direction as well, so it's on both sides. And from here we're going to open it just slightly, enough to separate the 2 layers, and we're going to pull straight up, so that way it kind of closes in on itself, and we're going to get a long diamond shape. So you may need to fix this top point a bit just to get it straight, but here we go. Here's our long diamond. Making sure my creases stay in place. And from here we flip over and do the same thing. Slightly open the flaps, separate the 2 layers, and pull straight up to create this long diamond shape. So here we go. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to take this edge. So these are the sides that we're going to fold into the center crease, and we're going to do it on both sides, making it even thinner long diamond or long kite shape, whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to flip it over and do the same thing, making sure that when we fold it over, it doesn't overlap on this center part, because that will make the next fold a little more difficult. So you want it to be right in line or just behind the crease so it doesn't overlap. We've got our long diamond. What we do now is we're going to look at the side, and there's this space here. I'm going to put my index finger in there, put my thumb between the flaps and push it up. So that way it sticks out like a tail. From here, I'm going to show y'all what the bottom looks like, but it kind of folds in half here when you bring the two bottom points together, and it'll stick out at the side at an angle, and the same on the other side. Index finger in the space between, thumb on the back of the flap, pulling it up. I'm trying to make sure that it's not overlapping here. It is a little bit, and that's okay. That makes this a little harder, but you can still get it if you use your nails to kind of wiggle it back into place and press the two bottom points together. So we get our shape. Kind of looks like a crown, but I'm going to fix this side first. Just pulling the tail part out a little more, so that way it's kind of even on the bottom. Now using this side, I'm going to use that same technique here to create the head. Thumb on one side, index finger on the other. Let's see if I can get this focused better. Closer. So I use my nail to kind of poke it into place, and then close the head over that part I folded down. So it'll look like this, and now we can zoom back out. And now here, thumb and index finger on each wing. So I put my thumb about halfway down and index finger behind it and slowly rock back and forth to open it up. And from there, we have our crane.